Okay, what you just saw there was the launching of 3 communications satellites off of a single booster. Now, you probably won't be doing this in your career because generally you install remote tech right away, and then you'll have to do that one launch vehicle at a time because you just simply won't have the very large rockets necessary to put 3 satellites up in orbit all at once. Now, the whole purpose of remote tech is to simulate radio blind spots in communications. So the idea here with these 3 satellites was to position them so that there are no blind spots. So the Kerbin Space Center can communicate with that booster going around that low orbit on the backside of the planet by sending a signal up to the satellite directly over its head, bounced off of one of the 2 satellites behind, and then down to the booster. And you can see here as the booster circles the planet, its radio signals are getting handed off from satellite to satellite. It is important that you have no blind spots because with remote tech installed, any unpiloted vehicle cannot be interacted with unless you have a 2-way radio communication. Now, I placed each of those satellites in a geosynchronous orbit. Geosynchronous orbits are at pretty high altitude. It was over 2,000 kilometers up and equally spaced out through that orbit. That's a 6-hour orbit, so each satellite needed to be placed 2 hours apart to complete the circle. Now, as far as the boost stage goes, I decided to use a 2-stage launcher this time. The first booster had to get the second stage up to 50 kilometers and about twice the speed of sound. Now, the difference between a normal launch and a launch where you're trying to get a satellite directly above the KSC is that typically you're going to launch almost straight up. This first stage went up at 89 degrees. And it burned for about a minute and a half. And once this first stage booster hit apoapsis, I had to do a small correction burn of about 30 meters per second to get it to fall back into the landing zone. Then I had to burn some fuel to slow it down to get to subsonic speed so I could deploy the parachutes. And then a little bit more fuel for the actual touchdown. Now the second stage burned for roughly 5 minutes to get it up to its apoapsis, and I had to keep the prograde vector at 70 degrees because it takes about an hour and a half to get up there. And I burned its engines until its apoapsis was up at the geosynchronous altitude. Once at apoapsis, the second stage burned prograde some more until it had an eccentric orbit with an exact 4-hour period. I could have gone 2 hours or 4 hours. I chose 4 because 2 would have put its periapsis in the atmosphere, and of course that wouldn't work. Then the satellite used its own power to circularize its orbit to exactly 6 hours, which is 1 day on Kerbin. That way this satellite will just float right above the KSC all the time. Now, this first satellite over the KSC has more dishes than the rest. Each of these dishes has a specific purpose. One will be for MUN, one will be for MINMUS, one each will be for the other 2 satellites in the back, and one each will be aimed at satellites to be placed in the future. Now I'm going to time warp around until the booster is back up at this apoapsis. It should be exactly 2 hours in front of the satellite it just released. And you can see as it does this swing around that it keeps communication with the previous satellite, which is the perfect position to release satellite number 2. Satellite number 2 then completes its circularization, and we go around again. And now at the last release here, this third satellite is now 2 hours ahead of the last one we did and 4 hours ahead of the first one. And here we are doing about, 4 error braking passes to bring its orbit back down to a reasonable level. Now this is not a graphics glitch. Those are the SpaceX Merlin 1D vacuum engines with heat resistance applied to them. Perfect for re-entering. And then this stage, of course, landed just fine. Pretty easy to land a stage that's nice and short like that. Anyway, thank you for watching. If you have any questions, post them in the comments. I hope you liked the video, and always fly with confidence.